Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in 0 sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Hi there, Duke fans. Episode 563 of the Duke Basketball Roundup coming at you. I'm Jason Evans, joined by Donald Wine, and we have the unfortunate task of talking about Duke's loss last night to Arkansas. Not a fun game. The Blue Devils go down 80-75. If we're really being honest, throughout most of the second half, it wasn't that close. Arkansas, it was a really close game for about 24 minutes or so, and then Arkansas stretched it out. And the Blue Devils were sort of fighting from behind the whole way from there, even though they made it close at the end. And it was not out of the question that Duke was going to come back and win this. There were a couple, like Caleb Foster missed a 3-pointer that if he hits it, I think Arkansas moves into major panic mode. But Donald, we do have to talk about this. And it's a concerning game. Look, before we even get to the headlines, man, this is just a really, I'm worried about this Duke team. First of all, because Duke in the non-conference only has 4 big opportunities, and we've now lost 2 of them. And the one that we won was a game where Caleb Foster uncharacteristically went Superman. You know, I'd love for him to do it again. I'd love for him to do it often. But we've now seen several games of Caleb Foster playing basketball, and he hasn't played anything like that in any other game. And so aside from that one game where we were lifted by a guy who hasn't shown he can do that on a consistent basis, this Duke team has not looked good against top quality opponents. So look, I don't I don't know exactly. Maybe I should be getting to the headlines first.
Well, before we do, I think that is a good point, right? When we talk about this, you kind of have to, this is not something that just you and I have been talking about. This is something that a lot of Duke fans, we got a lot of emails. Thank you to everybody who sent in emails for headlines or just analysis of the game. But this was a constant topic that this Duke team is not the Duke team that we were expecting to start the season. And we understand that this was a difficult schedule with a couple of pretty big teams that we had, 4 major tests that we knew were going to be on this early non-conference, schedule in November and December. And like you said, we've already lost to the 2, as K-Man said, we lost to the 2 U of A's. So maybe we should take all the A's out of the dictionary in the phone book when we start calling teams for next year. But it's very concerning in the sense that the inconsistency that we see from freshmen, we're willing to chalk that up to being freshmen. Freshmen do that. It's the inconsistency from the players who have been here before.
4 returning,
the most concerning.
4 returning starters. Yeah. Like a team.
I'm not even going to limit it to the starters. It's the guys who have been here before have been inconsistent as well. And that's where we thought, hey, you can fight through the freshman inconsistency by having some consistent players that have been a part of this, that understand what it's like to play at Duke University, to play these big games, and to be the ones that could lead this team into these big moments. And last night, I mean, first of all, shout out to Arkansas, shout out to Bud Walton Arena. The stadium seats 19,500, and they put 20 large in there, and they were loud. It was, as my best friend said, it was an NBA type atmosphere, playoff atmosphere. There were times where they were quiet, but when they got loud, and you could hear it on the broadcast. We even had a guy, David Rake, shout out to him, who drove from Arlington, Texas, where I just was, to Fayetteville for the game, and he commented on how loud it was in there. Again, we should expect that every arena we go, it's someone's Super Bowl is what it feels like, and that atmosphere is there. So we start with the things that we were missing in some of these games previously. We talked about the effort, we talked about the intensity, we talked about the energy. It seemed like all that was sort of there for a little bit, but it seemed like something else was off, and it's hard to pinpoint where it is. I know we're going to talk about a lot of these different areas, but where the wheels fell off is kind of hard to kind of pinpoint to just one thing.
All right, let's get back on track and get back to the headlines. By the way, Donald, we had no less than 4 emails that were titled "Ugh." 4 completely different people wrote us emails, and literally the subject was "Ugh." And there was one that was just titled "What's Wrong with Mitchell?" and had nothing else in the email other than that. Like, there was nothing in the body. Just the subject line was "What's wrong with Mitchell?" and there was nothing else. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a headline. It could be a headline. Let me tell you. Go ahead and give me your favorite headlines from this game.
So there was a few, and I think, Jason, starting with the line of what we were just talking about, Zach Harris, his headline was "Sound of Jackhammers means Duke is still under construction," which I think is pretty perfect for what what we've kind of dealt with. Nigel Sapp had a couple that I thought were good. Roadkilled, running Razorbacks and the must bus roll over Blue Devils in Fayetteville, and he also had a tale of 2 marks. Flat shots keep Razorbacks hot, absent their best player, and allude to what you said, Mark Mitchell, and his offense. I know we'll talk about that, but also the fact that they were missing their best player in Tremont Mark, and were able to overcome that. And then another one that I thought was really good was from Chris Emmershine. The Devils went down to Arkansas looking for a game to steal, but couldn't quite battle back against the Brazilian Carnival block party. And look, there was a lot of times. I mean, again, shout out to Arkansas. They had some great defensive plays inside the paint that really, again, those blocks aren't anything but momentum killers, right? Or momentum builders on their side. And that's what got a lot of the people off their feet, and they were able to capitalize on the other end.
So it's so funny. We had so many good emails, so many good headlines that I had a few that you didn't mention. I liked Chris Bynum. He said, "Duke's shooting, the new 40 minutes of hell." Whew, he was right. We're going to talk about the shooting. It was not pretty in this game. Josh Levinson chimed in with good use of alliteration. Devils' dismal display just yields just desserts. I think that Josh...
Or deserts. It said deserts. Yields just deserts.
He said desserts, just desserts, not just deserts.
It says DESERTS.
That's because he misspelled it. He meant just desserts. Come on, man. Cut him some slack.
There's no desserts last night that I had.
Look, the point he's making there is that Duke deserved this. That and I'm not going to argue with that at all. Eric Blumenthal had one. I liked the rhyming. Shire Duke needs some fire before things become dire. I would argue that things maybe already have become dire. And you mentioned David Rakes, who drove down there to see the game. He had rowdy Razorbacks run rings around the Devils. And he mentioned, by the way, that Arkansas fans were very nice. The place was just flying off the hook. And he said they had the 1994 trophy on display for anyone who wanted to take pictures with it. For those of you not old enough to remember, in 1994, Arkansas defeated the Blue Devils in the national championship game, in a game which I continue to this day to blame on Tony Lang's manicurist, who trimmed his nails too much. And as a result, Tony Lang did not block Scotty Thurman's desperation 3-pointer. If he had blocked it, the Blue Devils, Grant Hill, would have one more ring. But, those are the breaks. And those were the headlines. I thought those were excellent from folks. Should we get to the good before we get to a lot of bad?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm going to start. I don't have a lot of good, Donald. I do not have a lot of good. But one thing that is definitely good? With 6 minutes and 50 seconds left in the first half, TJ Power checked in the game. That is probably the most important minutes, the earliest he's checked into any game yet in his career. He immediately responds with 2 very sweet-looking 3-pointers. Look, he played more, especially down the stretch in the second half, which showed that this wasn't just John Shire was like, yeah, you look like you got something to add and help with the team. He didn't hit any more 3-pointers. And I think that probably part of the reason you saw Duke going zone at that point, Duke went zone. I think part of that was an effort to hide some of TJ Power's weaknesses on defense. Not saying he's never going to get there, but at the moment, I think defense is probably something that TJ Power is still working very hard on getting up to the level it needs to be. But looks like John Shire decided that his shooting touch was essential enough that we were going to put him in the game, even with some perhaps defensive limitations. And I thought he responded really, really well. Clearly his best and most important game as a Blue Devil.
And Jason, I don't think he did terrible on the defensive end. I know, when you talk about the zone, a lot of people think the zone, like you mentioned, it is put in sometimes to hide deficiencies on the defensive end, but it's no slouch to run a zone. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be able to guard multiple areas on the court, even if you're in a particular zone. And I thought he did that fairly well. There was, I mean, it wasn't the best stretch of basketball for Duke at all, but I thought he did fairly well when he was in the game on defense. And like you said, on offense, those two 3-pointers were both crucial 3-pointers that kept us in the game at certain points. So I really appreciate that. Jason, I want to shift to the second half. We're going to kind of go back and forth here. The second half, I mean, forget the stats. There's stats that we can talk about with regards to, Kyle Filipowski getting 23 points in the second half, Jeremy Roach at 14 points in the second half. But I just want to comment on the end of the game. We showed a lot of fight. We didn't have that fight the whole game, but I like the fact that, like you said, we came down. We had a point where we could knock the game down. We were an inch away from that being a 1-point ball game with about 35 seconds left in the game. And that's a testament to the fact that, hey, when the chips were going down, they did just fold. They went and tried to get plays. They tried to, get steals. They pressed. They kind of brought the 40 minutes of hell on the other end for Arkansas. Gave them a dose of their own medicine, and they weren't able to handle it. And we were able to capitalize and bring it from what was probably a 12, 13-point game all the way down to almost a 1-point game with 30 seconds left. So I really appreciate the fight that they showed in the second half. It's just, a matter of as John Shire has said too, we need that fight the whole game. We just didn't have it. But I do like the fact that we are trying to close out games with a sense of urgency. And that was present at least in the last 5 minutes of the ball game.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about the second half, because I also had in the good both Kyle Filipowski and Jeremy Roach were excellent for the second game in a row. They were excellent, and they took the lead in the second half of what were, close contests where we really needed them to step up, because frankly, no one else was. I mean, Flip was a non-entity in the first half, and a lot of that is a function of foul trouble. But in the second half, 23 points and 6 rebounds in just a half. Jeremy Roach, by the way, had 14 points in just a half. Those are big numbers. And those two guys, look, there are a lot of guys in this team that seem to be struggling, seem to be figuring things out. Those are two guys, arguably our two most experienced players, at least in terms of minutes in a Duke uniform. And the two of them, I think, they are something that we can count on, which at this moment is something we need to hear a lot of.
I also think, shout out Jared McCain. I think, again, he didn't have the great shooting night, but he definitely took care of business on the defensive end with regards to rebounding. He had 7 rebounds in the second half. He had 10 overall. Yeah. And when we talk about rebounding, as we've said, this year is going to have to be a team thing. And at least from the perimeter, he's the guy that's really been most consistent at going up and trying to get these long rebounds, loose balls. Like I said, we didn't win all the 50-50 balls, but we were fighting for them. And I think it felt like in the second half, Jared McCain came away with a lot of those 50-50 balls and was able to keep us in the game by keeping it close and keeping Arkansas off the glass.
Yeah. So the last thing I have in the good from this game is that I felt like Duke held on to the ball pretty nicely. Arkansas is a very long team. They're a team that's putting a lot of pressure on you. We saw them pressing full court a number of times. They're trying to speed you up, trying to force you into mistakes. And Duke finished this game with only 8 turnovers. And I thought that was, look, that's a credit to our guards. Frankly, I'm going to say it, there's not a lot our guards did really well in this game, but at least they didn't turn the ball over excessively. So look, if we're looking for good and there's not a ton of it, I'm going to cite that. Do you have anything else in the good?
Yeah, I think on the other end, steals. We were able, you said we took care of the basketball, but we also were able to force them into making some bad decisions. Again, all these things are what kept the game close, especially at the end. But I do think, one, we were able to force them into making bad decisions on defense. We got to the line quite a bit. And, there's times where, yeah, we had a couple of turnovers where we were doing something in the paint and we threw the ball to the wrong person. But a lot of times it was going right at guys. and forcing them to either foul or get out of the way so we can make layups. And I think that I thought was great, but also on defense, we were forcing the issue. We were very aggressive. Sometimes, and there's a couple of times where there were some ticky-tack fouls, but it was a result of aggression trying to get the basketball. And we were able to do that. I think we had 12 steals, or they had 12 turnovers on the game. Yeah. So I like the fact that we were forcing them into making bad decisions and trying to go the other way to get some points out of it.
All right, we're going to shift our focus now to things that were troubling in this game. I would expect that this section will take a little while to get through, so bear with us, folks. I'm going to start with this. There was a moment in this game. It was in the second half. Tyrese Proctor was wide open for a corner three-pointer. It doinked off the backboard, which is just not – that's a bad shot. That is a shot that misses badly. By the way, he had an airball three-pointer earlier in the game. But this one particular sequence, he goes up to take a three. It doinks off the side of the backboard. Arkansas races the other way, ends up taking a contested three-pointer like on the move. I don't even – like it was one of these shots where when the guy went up for it, I was like, is he really shooting this right now? And it did nothing but swish. And this was emblematic to me of what we saw in this game, of Duke just missing good shots again and again and again. And Donald, bear with me for a moment, because I've got – and everyone out there, bear with me. There are a lot of numbers I'm about to give you. I spent way too much time studying the shot chart, one of those things, the shot chart for this game, because there's some really fascinating things to get from it. First of all, Duke only took 4 mid-range jumpers. You know, I talk about that all the time. I hate the mid-range jumper. That shot between like 10 and 19 feet. Duke only took 4 of them. I'd rather it be 0, but only 4 is not, that's not that bad. We, of course, missed all 4 of them. Duke only went 6 of 22 on three-pointers. That's 27%. And as I mentioned when I was talking about Tyrese Proctor a moment ago, we were 6 of 22, and there frankly weren't many three-pointers we took that I wasn't like, that's a good shot. That's a shot you should be taking. Our ability to miss open threes in this game was troublesome. But I'm going to get to the real thing. The real damage here was on what are known as short-range shots. More than half of Duke's 2-point shots were taken in the paint. I'm not talking at the rim. I'm not talking layups. And look, we missed a lot of layups too. But I'm talking short-range shots. These are good shots. These are the kind of shots that a team should want to take. 24 of our 45 shots in this game, more than half the shots we took in this game, were taken in the lane, but not at the rim. Duke hit just 5 of them. I'm going to repeat that. On good shots, shots between like 3 and 10 feet, Duke was 5 of 24. That's barely 20%. For comparison, just so you understand, the national average on that type of shot is 40%. Duke's average this season on that type of shot is better than 43%. We hit barely 20%. If Duke hits a normal average, not saying we shoot well, not even saying we shoot like we normally do. I'm saying if we shoot like a normal average NCAA team does on those shots in the lane, but not at the rim, Duke would have won this game by probably around 10 points. It was just so frustrating. We got in the lane for a shot on 60% of our field goal attempts in this game. That means we were taking the right shot a tremendous percentage of the time. We got the shots we wanted. We just could not knock them down at all. And look, again, a lot of it is full credit to Arkansas. Their rim protection was outstanding. We told you on the preview, Donald, that they are an elite shot blocking team. They absolutely proved it with 10 blocks, including, by the way, five blocks of Kyle Filipowski. But my goodness, Duke, you just have to figure out a way. That's a good, again, we were taking the right shots. We just hit them at a 20% rate, which is abysmally bad.
Jason, I'll get back to that part in a second, because I think what you just said is important. I think the missing of the layups is something that we have talked about the last 3 games, and it continued last night. We missed a lot of layups where, again, and some of them were contested, but a lot of them were plays that we normally make. And I think that is where the frustration lies. And when you couple that with what the stat you just said, right? There was a lot of times where, and I'm not singling out Kyle Filipowski, he's not the only one that did this, But there was a couple of times where, Cal Filipowski, for example, would take the ball. He'd be at 8 feet, and you and I and everyone else in Blue Devil Nation is like, well, we know what he's about to do. He's taking this to the rack. He's going hard, and he's either getting it in or he's getting fouled. And he would somehow shoot it from 8 feet, and it would only go 6, or it only go 7.5 feet, and it would clang off the front rim. And we saw a lot of that. Whereas there was a couple where, Mark Mitchell would try to drive in, and he actually got one to go in, but it felt like everything was just short inside the lane. And instead of going to the rack, going off, and there was a couple of times also, Jason, where we passed up really good layups for contested 3-pointers. We had guys that would drive in, look like they're about to go in for a layup, hesitate, and then would have the defense collapse around them, and they'd either try to go up with it or they'd throw it out for a contested layup. And I think the concerning thing is the bunnies, as I call them, the layups. We should be making those at a 75-80% rate. And I feel like it felt like last night that we were making them at like a 40% rate, because every single time we went down, there was a lot of possessions that ended frustratingly with the ball going off the glass, hitting the rim, rolling around, and ending up in the hands of a Razorback player going the other way. And they would make it on the other end. So it's a 4-point swing every single time. You just can't overcome so many of those like we did last night.
Yeah. All right. Let me continue my theme about shooting, because I said we were terrible in the lane. I said we were terrible from 3-point range. There's one other category of shooting out there: free throws. Duke was terrible on free throws too. Not quite as abysmal maybe as in some of these other categories where you only hit 20% and such, but Duke only hit 67% of their free throws last night. And to me, what really matters is in the final minute, as Duke was clawing and scraping to get back in this game, we're down 5 points. We got back-to-back turnovers from Arkansas and a chance to cut the game to 3 and put some real pressure on them. And Jeremy Roach missed a free throw that left it as a 4-point game as opposed to being a 3-point game. And as you full well know, there's a gulf. There's no one point in basketball that is, I guess, the point between being tied or down 1. But other than that, the other point that is super important in basketball is the difference in being down 3 and 4 points. If you're down 3 points, you can play good defense and try and force the opposing team to make a bucket. If you're down 4 points, you have to foul, at least, if you're inside the final 40 seconds or so. And Jeremy Roach missed a clutch free throw that would have turned a 4-point game into a 3-point game. Our guards, McCain, Roach, and Caleb Foster, each missed 2 free throws during this game. Guards are good shooters. All 3 of those guys are good shooters. And it's just killer. I'm not saying Duke needs to make every single free throw, but when you're in a tight competitive game on the road, man, you got to do a little better than 67%. Get up to 75, guys, get close to 80. And this is a different game if that's what happens.
Yeah. Free throws are everything. I mean, those are free opportunities at points, and we left at least 10 on the table. And even more when I think we had a couple that were the missed front ends of 1-on-1s. When you have that's again, opportunities that you have to get points. And these are, like I said, these are all little details where you can't really pinpoint which one thing cost you the game. But when you tally them all up, you go, hey, if we had done any of these half as better as we normally do, we're winning this ball game. And Bud Walton Arena is not the loudest arena in America. They're the quietest 19,000 you'll ever see. But that's just sometimes how the breaks goes. And again, it's that old thing called momentum. They had a lot of it last night that we had to overcome. And even in that last 5 minutes, like you said, we'd get within 4, we'd get within 3. Then all of a sudden we'd miss a free throw, we'd miss a bunny. They'd go down and hit a contested jumper or hit a contested shot. And all of a sudden it's back up to 8 and they're going nuts again. And we have to call a timeout to regroup. That's the thing that you would hope that this team would be able to recognize and overcome, especially considering that happened against Arizona at home. It happened against Southern Indiana at home. And now it happened on the road. So it's frustrating because you want this to happen and we as fans can see it. And I know the players can see it too. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that you physically are able to do what is necessary to handle it. And that's what happened last night. It didn't really feel like this team had an answer for everything that Arkansas was throwing at them, even though there were times where Arkansas wasn't playing their best basketball either.
No, yeah. Look, we're sort of alluding now to toughness. And John Shire said he came at like his absolute first comment at the post-game press conference was there wasn't that collective toughness that you have to have on the road. Donald, you talked a little bit about that arena just bouncing, and we did nothing. Duke did nothing to stop that Arkansas crowd from being really into this game. Again, as we've mentioned, got to credit Arkansas with being hungry and desperate. They were unquestionably desperate. And the crowd was the largest crowd in the history of Arkansas's storied program. That's a big deal. And they lifted that team again and again. But, newsflash, it ain't easy to win on the road. I think we saw that in the ACC SEC challenge. We saw that again and again and again. But I mentioned John Shire's comments, and I'm gonna put a little bit of this loss on John Shire. I'm not exactly thrilled with his game planning. Duke seems to be a team that almost exclusively goes one-on-one on offense. There's just not as much ball movement as I'd like to see. Not much screening out of this team other than for the ball handler. We don't screen to get other guys open. We only tend to screen for the ball handler. And, last night, that's what I'm talking about. Those are the reasons we only had 10 assists in this game. We just count on our creators. And look, we have a number of guys who are great creating with the ball in their hand, but we're counting on them to just take the ball to the basket on their own. Contrast that with what Arkansas did last night. They kept moving the ball all over the place. They repeatedly made the second pass, the third pass, the extra pass that resulted in layups and dunks. Duke had assists on just 33% of our 2-point baskets. Arkansas assisted on almost 50% of their twos, and they assisted on every single one of their 3-pointers. Didn't take a single 3-pointer off the dribble. Every single 3-pointer they took was a guy who got it off an assist. And that just wasn't the way that Duke played. And I think that John Shire needs to really look at the way this team is playing offense. I'm not saying that, in the couple days we've got before the Georgia Tech game that we're going to be able to completely remake things. But this one-on-one offense, this lack of screening needs to change, or Duke's going to be a team that suffers when it doesn't shoot well.
The thing about Arkansas passing the ball around and having great ball movement, we talked about that in the preview, is something that they hadn't done well this season to date. And they were able to turn around and make something out of it last night. But I will say this about toughness. I go back to that 2018, 2019 team where and they didn't win every game on the road, but they had RJ Barrett, they had Zion Williamson, they had Cam Reddish, they had Tyus Jones. They had a bunch of guys who, Trey Jones, who they could, they embraced being on the road. What was the famous quote from RJ Barrett? Like, when we won at UNC, it's like, we wore black because it's their funeral. Like, they embraced walking into someone else's gym, ripping their heart out, and leaving with it. And this is where, and I'm not saying that every team has to have that sort of, nobody likes us, we don't care mentality, but you kind of have to when you're Duke University. You have to block all that out. You have to go on the road and be able to execute. And this is not the last road game that we're going to have. It's not even the biggest road game we're going to have. It's not even the biggest arena that we're going to see, right? Yeah. There's the ACC is full of people who are waiting for us to come into their gyms so they can beat us down. And we have to walk into every single gym with the mentality of, nope, not tonight. Like, the energy's got to be there. And that's where these slow starts that we've had over the last few games, that's where it comes back to bite you. Jeremy Roach in the press conference last night, he said, the first 4 minutes, we can be really good throughout the game, and we had our moments, but the first 4 minutes is what makes or breaks games. And last night it was no exception. Last night, the first 4 minutes, Arkansas had it and we didn't. And we've said that way too many times so far in this early season. They need to figure out how to start well on the road, both halves. They need to figure out how to finish well, both halves on the road, and then figure out how to embrace the intensity that is being placed upon them when they walk into these gyms.
All right, it's time for me to call out some players by name. I don't like to do this, but it has to be done. Mark Mitchell played only 6 minutes and 45 seconds of the second half. We had emailers who said he was unplayable. John Shire apparently agreed. Only 6 minutes and 45 seconds of the second half, and during that time, Duke was -9 in those minutes. Look, we say all the time that plus minus is not a stat that you should look at too carefully on a game-by-game basis. A lot of screwy things can happen with it. But frankly, if you're a starter, if you're a guy who expects to be in the NBA next year, and you're only playing 6.5 minutes of the second half of a close, competitive, important game, and the team is -9 in those 6.5 minutes, that's a problem. He only plays 19 minutes in this game. He only picked up 3 rebounds. Mark Mitchell did in those 19 minutes. His three-pointers, frankly, look like they have no chance. He's now 1 of 12 on three-pointers on this season. 1 of 12, Donald. It's really bad. And
not great.
We've seen the formula, man. Every team is going to start doing this. They're just not even pretending to guard Mark Mitchell when he's outside of the lane. They have a big man, usually like, their top rim protector, and they go, yeah, he's just going to stand under the bucket here, Mark. Mark, you go do what you want on the outside because we know you can't hit a shot out there. Arkansas talked about it in the post-game press conference. They're like, yeah, we're going to let Mark Mitchell take as many three-pointers as he wanted because we knew not to be afraid of that at all. And Duke's got to figure – Mark Mitchell is too valuable a player in other aspects of the game for him to create huge spacing problems for us on offense. Look, his assist rate is far and away the lowest of any of our regular players, so he's not going to be a guy who creates a lot with his passing. When he goes to the basket, he's typically shooting it. He's not passing it. He's got to figure out some way to become effective. Multiple listeners wrote to us saying that they think he's unplayable. I think that John Shire is going to come up with ways of making Mark Mitchell more a part of the offense. My suggestion, Jay Billis was saying this constantly on the broadcast. My suggestion would be to have, as opposed to having Mark Mitchell stand at the 3-point line, unguarded, and then probably either not take the shot or take a bad shot. Put him into screens. Get him in there screening the guy who has the ball. Because if he sets a screen for Tyrese Proctor and his man, the guy who's supposed to be covering Mark Mitchell, is dropped back into the lane, it's going to create space for Tyrese Proctor to take a nice, short jumper. Same with Jeremy Roach. Same with Jared McCain. We've got to find a way to make Mark Mitchell into not a huge liability on offense.
I think that's a great point. I think the one thing that the thing I think about when you just said that is Ryan Young. Ryan Young against Arizona, he had several plays where he was catching the ball out in the perimeter, and whoever was guarding him was like, "Nah, man, I don't need to guard you, right? He's not going to shoot. Don't need to guard him." They would slough into the paint. You know where Ryan Young has not been since that game? Outside the paint.
Yep.
We figured out a way to keep him inside the paint so that the defense has to play honest. And last night, that's not what happened. Mark Mitchell was in positions on the floor where he had the ball, where the defense didn't have to play honest on him. If you, like you said, you have him in the inside the perimeter, like not necessarily in the paint, but in the perimeter running screens, because there's a way for someone to set a screen in the paint, have that guy go through. Once that defender fights off, you kind of fill in a space. And when you fill in that space, you are going to be open every single time you get the ball in the position where you can inflict the most damage. And I think for Mark Mitchell, that damage is inside the paint. Every time he can take it and turn around, maybe not necessarily hit the 10-footer, but at least fake it and go to the rim. But again, they still have to play honest defense on him because they're closer to the basket. Last night, I don't know what happened with Mark Mitchell, but he was not in the positions where it really hurt our team, because he was in positions where Arkansas didn't have to play that defense on him. And just that one guy being able to slack off of him into the paint clogged that up for Cal Filipowski, clogged it up for anybody who was down there, and it also clogged it up for the perimeter guys who like to drive to the basket, because there's still one more defender that is in there waiting to meet them, which is why they were able to get so many blocks. So that's where they need to figure out, not just for Georgia Tech, but beyond. Not just for Mark Mitchell either, how to get these guys in the best position possible so that no matter who is on the court at any given time, the opposition has to play honest defense. Because if they're playing honest defense, I'm taking Duke 9 times out of 9, right? We will be able to beat any team that can do that straight up. We have the guys to do it. but we can't do it if we're basically playing 4-on-5. And at several stretches at this point so far in the season, we have had to play 4-on-5 on offense, and that's not where you want to be.
All right, my last thing I have in the bad, our freshman guards. Jared McCain goes 1 for 7 on this game. He missed a couple free throws. You mentioned he did grab some rebounds, and hat tip to him for that. But Jared McCain was not recruited to Duke. Jared McCain is not a starter at Duke because of his rebounding prowess. Caleb Foster plays 19 minutes in this game. He's 0 for 5 from the field. He also missed a couple free throws. I mean, these guys did nothing, next to nothing, to help this team on a night when we were really, really struggling to get points and where we were struggling to hit some shots. Look, for that matter, the entire bench core. I mean, Ryan Young had 1 point in this game. Duke was outscored so severely, by Arkansas in terms of bench scoring. The final number is Arkansas 36, Duke 9. That's really, really problematic. There's no place else. There's no place in the game where Duke got outscored, outplayed the way they did in bench points. And there's a number of guys who, big game, did not show up.
Jason, I think the last thing for me, and again, this is more of a general thing, is we need to figure out how to fight through nights where we are not shooting the ball well. Last night, we didn't shoot the ball well at all. For the game, we shot 35% from the floor. We shot 27% from 3. And like you said, you've talked about the metrics, right, of some of these plays that, and again, sometimes the ball just doesn't go in the hole. It doesn't feel like it. But at the same time, we have to figure out how to fight through that. And one of the places you can do that is at the charity stripe. Like you mentioned, we were way off from there. We only hit 67% when we normally are hitting 80 to 83%. You want to be at a point where you're not leaving points on the table. Even if you have a bad shooting night, you make up for it in other ways. There's just too many times where we've had guys so far in the season who have been inconsistent in figuring out how to make those plays, even if one of those things aren't struggling. If one guy, if Kyle Filipowski is not getting rebounds, he's figuring out how to score more points or maybe get a steal or something like that, or play better defense. Like in Jeremy Roach, when he's not shooting well in the first half, yeah, they've been doing well in the second half to compensate for that. But you have to figure out throughout the game to recognize early, hey, I mean, look, we all have it, Jason. You and I play pickup basketball. There's times where you show up at the court, I'm like, yo, man, I ain't got it today. Like three's
Yep.
off today. And what do? You normally say, hey, I'm gonna pass the ball, get my teammates involved, maybe play a little defense, but you figure out a way to help your team in a way that'll help them win the game. And if it's something that's off, hey, I'm making a bunch of threes, but I'm not making my layups. I'm gonna stay out here in the 3-point line and do what I'm doing good today. That's what they need to figure out. And again, this is a young season. This is still a young team, despite the fact we have a lot of people coming back. They still need to figure out how to do that as this team. And the unfortunate thing is we've had a lot of tests where those tests have failed primarily because they have not figured that out. This is the point of emphasis for the next few weeks, is to figure out, hey, if something's not going right, how can I help my team anyway? And that's everyone from the starting 5 to the guys coming off the bench, Christian Reeves and TJ Power and all those guys. Again, TJ Power is like, hey, I'm not great at defense, but I can hit some threes. Came off the bench, hit some threes. That's what you want to see. Something to affect in a positive way that this team is moving forward. I'm willing to. I'm okay with where we are in the sense that, hey, we have 2 losses. We had a tough stretch of November, one of the toughest Novembers we've had in quite a long time. To escape with 2 losses, hey, that's fine. But from where we were expecting this team to be, that is the one thing I think needs to be figured out, and needs to be figured out pretty quickly.
All right, man, as we wrap it up on the game, let's talk about our play of the game. What was your, I bet we have the same one. There was one play that I thought was pretty spectacular. What's your play of the game, Donald?
I don't know if it's the same one, because I think for me, the start of the fight came, there was a point where we made a layup and I forgot who made the layup. But right after that, Jared McCain kind of flew in, stole the inbounds pass and laid it up again.
Yeah.
And got it. And basically we got a 4-point play out of it. And it started the idea of, hey, if we keep doing this, we keep pressuring them, we can make them make bad decisions with the basketball, and we can turn into points on the other end. So I like that because I think it started our climb back. I know we ended up falling short, but those are the plays that can help spur a run. It doesn't have to necessarily be a great dunk or a huge three. It can be a play like that.
Well, we have different plays of the game then, because I went with the play that with 15 and a half minutes left where Jared McCain grabbed a rebound. He took like one dribble and looked up floor, and Tyrese Proctor was streaking up the wing. He threw a nice long pass to Tyrese Proctor, who immediately fired like a really sweet bounce pass to Kyle Filipowski, who made a reverse layup in transition. Arkansas led by 3. After that play, they led by 1. I felt like in that moment, I was like, that is the kind of play that's going to inspire this team, and we're going to start playing better, and we're going to take this thing to them. Turned out I was wrong. Almost immediately, like within minutes of that, Arkansas went on their run that gave them sort of a comfortable lead for a little bit. But at least for that moment, I thought that was a heck of a play. The bounce pass that Tyrese Proctor is just such a creative passer. And that was a really special play, at least in my book.
And that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep doing them, right? Just because it didn't work this time, we should keep doing those plays. We like those plays.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we promise we won't be too long. We've been going on for a while. But we're going to talk a little bit about the rest of the ACC SEC Challenge. Who impressed us and who did not? That story when we come back. Donald, we're back from the break, and let's talk a little bit about the rest of the ACC SEC Challenge. The ACC goes 7-7. I think, coming into the challenge, if you looked at sort of who was favored and who wasn't in every single game, you would have said the ACC is going to win like maybe 4 or 5. So winning 7 is not bad. I'll take that. I mean, the SEC is widely considered, I guess, right up there with the Big Ten as like the second or third best conference. So, and the ACC is a little ways back. So, hey, going 7-7 against them should be good. That said, Duke should have won. We would have won at 8-6. That's what I really wanted to see. That's life. Let me just give you my quick notes on it, man, and then you can give me your quick notes. And I'll be very fast with this. I hate to say it, people. I know none of you are going to be happy with me for saying this, but frankly,
Don't say it.
It's about to happen, man. At the moment, I think that UNC looks like the best team in the ACC. I'm sorry. The final score of their game with Tennessee does not reveal how badly the Tar Heels stomped the Volunteers. Now, it was at Carolina. And we're going to mention the fact that most of these wins I'm going to talk about, most of these games I'm going to talk about are home game, the home team winning. That was a major theme in the ACC SEC Challenge. So Carolina playing at home looked really, really good. And they are a team that is their offense is really clicking. The Tar Heels are scoring a lot. Clemson.
They had 90 points. They had 90 points with like 7 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
And they finished with 100. Like there's a flaw. It's how do they not score like 120 points?
Yeah, exactly right. Clemson is now the only remaining undefeated team in the ACC, and they did it by beating Alabama. Alabama is a good basketball team. Clemson is not ranked. I fully expect them to be ranked next. There's no question in my mind that they will be ranked unless they do something just stupid and terrible this weekend. I haven't even looked at their schedule. I should look and see who they're playing, but Clemson looks really, really solid. That's a big, big win for them. When we were talking about what to look forward to in the ACC SEC Challenge, I mentioned Pittsburgh was playing Missouri, and I was like, yeah, Pitt's got to win that game. Really important for them. Pitt did not win that game. Didn't happen. It was a home game. It was one of the few games where road teams took it and beat the home team. When Pittsburgh misses the NCAA tournament, they will look. I say win because I think they're probably not going to make it. When they miss the NCAA tournament, they're going to look back on that loss to Missouri and they're going to lament that. As I continue, don't look now, but Virginia appears to be a good team again. They already have wins this season over Florida, West Virginia, and Texas A&M. That Texas A&M win, really nice win. Henry Coleman's team, and Coleman played very, very well. But Virginia got that victory, and frankly, at the moment, if I'm ranking teams in the ACC, like I said, I think UNC looks best. think Clemson, Virginia, and Duke are in that next tier right there with them. And the reason I don't put Miami in that same tier is that, man, they got curb stomped. They got mollywopped. Pick your adjective or whatever you want to call it.
Easy on my alma mater, but
I'm sorry, man.
Damn.
What Kentucky did to them was just brutal. Kentucky was flying all over the court, playing super fast. Kentucky's playing small, and they're just like, they're creating chaos for teams, shooting a lot of threes, taking the ball to the hoop. For Kentucky to do that to Miami was really, really impressive. What'd you have from the challenge? What do you want to talk about, man?
So look, the first thing is you mentioned it, right? This is, first of all, I thought this was great. Like all of it. The ACC Big Ten Challenge, I thought, was one of the best things that college basketball had. And this carried over that excitement for me and a lot of people, right? I thought there were some really good matchups of teams. I think for the ACC to emerge with a stalemate is probably the best, one of the best case scenarios short of winning, right? Like they didn't, even if they lost by one, like, okay, whatever. But to tie 7-7 and have some of these wins, I think will do the conference a good service moving forward. And there, again, as we mentioned, there are still a couple more opportunities for the conference in the non-conference portion of the schedule to be able to, say, hey, look, we're better than you may think. But Jason, I think that, first of all, that Virginia win over Texas A&M, you mentioned Henry Coleman, like was very, very good in that game. And Virginia looked very good in beating them. And of course, in a true Virginia fashion, held the team to 47 points at home. So I think that was good. I also think, like you said, I don't like saying it either, but UNC, like I said, they probably should have put up 120 against Tennessee. And that game was a track meet, and they still were able to hold on. I think the one game other than ours that I thought was like, oh man, we almost got it. Remember the other day I said, hey, if Florida State can pick off Georgia, that might be the difference between us winning and maybe losing. They lost by 2 points at home to Georgia, and they were ahead in the second half and had a chance to really pull it away, and they just weren't able to.
Bad loss. That's a bad loss. Yeah.
It's a bad loss, but again, Florida State riding the high of them again winning their holiday tournament. I thought they were primed to be that one of those games like, hey, you may not watch this game, but this might be the difference. It certainly turned out it was, because that was the difference between the ACC winning 8-6 and it being the 7-7 draw that it was.
All right, Donald, with that, we're going to wrap up this latest edition of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Reminder, if you don't already know our email address, I don't know what you're doing, but our email address is dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from all of you. We love your headlines, your plays of the game. Heck, a lot of you just write us paragraphs and paragraphs of analysis. And I'm like, yeah, this is interesting. It's kind of cool. We respond to as much of it as we can, but we love hearing from all of you. Also, don't forget, visit Home Field Apparel. Use the code DBR podcast when you're checking out. You can save a little bit. What is it, Donald? They save 10%, 15%? Like
15%.
15%. Yeah, at Home Field and Fanatics, right?
Fanatics, you get it. We have an affiliate link. Go to our link tree, linktree.com/DBR podcast. Has links to everything. You can get everything in one shot. We're a one-stop shop here at the DBR podcast.
Exactly. Look, hey, check your feed. If you're listening to this episode, there's a decent chance that there's another DBR podcast episode in your feed right now, because we're going to be coming back in less than 24 hours to talk to you a little bit about the Duke's game coming up this weekend against Georgia Tech, being played in Atlanta. Donald, do you know where I am right now? I'm in Atlanta, man. I will be going to that game. Can't wait to see the Blue Devils in person. And with that, we're wrapping it up here on the latest episode of the DBR podcast. For Donald, I'm Jason. And this is the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.